Welcome to our webinar.
Yeah.
Today we are talking about virtual CFO, and if you attend a lot of webinars, you'll hear us use that term a lot. So today we're going to talk about what does it actually mean to be virtual CFO. So I won't try to tip off to that. We'll just go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to facilitate today's session. I am Tom Wadelton. My title is Virtual CFO at Summit CPA Group. You can jump to the next slide, Christian. So in that, I have about 20 clients who act as their financial consultant and virtual CFO. And so we'll talk more about what that role is. Before we jump into that, let's do some housekeeping. So today is a 1 credit hour session. You do need to attend all 50 minutes. We'll have 3 polling questions. I probably won't announce those. Those will just go ahead and pop up on your screen. So we need you to answer those. Having done that, you'll get the CPE certificate email within the next week. You can't actually talk to us during the session, but we monitor the questions very closely. I'll be doing that. Adam will as well. Where we can and it makes sense, we'll go ahead and interrupt and get those answered as much during the session as we can. And finally, probably the most common question is there a copy of the slides or can I get those slides? And those will be emailed out to you. Okay, so all those housekeeping things out of the way. I mentioned that I work for Summit CPA Group, as does Adam. So a little bit about us. The firm was started in 2002, and since 2004, we've been offering back office services and virtual CFO services to our clients. In 2013, we went fully distributed, no more office. We've got a remote team, gives us a lot of flexibility with where we employ people. Also our clients, mostly in the US, but we do have some outside the US as well. And then as of last year, Summit CPA joined Anders CPA and Advisors. We're now a division of Anders and really excited about being part of that firm. Okay, on to our 2 speakers. So Christian Wielage. Christian is the CEO of PlanGuru. He'll be going through a lot of our presentation today. And then Adam Hale is one of the co-founders of Summit CPA Group and is now a partner of Summit CPA Group, a division of Anders. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Tom.
So at the very beginning, Adam, you want to start? What is fractional CFO, virtual CFO? What does all this mean?
Yeah, I mean, especially whenever you're talking about fractional versus virtual, I think, Christian, we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, but really no difference there. I mean, what you're doing is you're coming in for a sliver of time. You're not working full time for a client. So whenever I think about virtual CFO, it's just kind of setting the stage that I'm not going to be at your office. You know, I live in Indiana, you live in Pennsylvania. That's how we're going to communicate together. I mean, I think traditionally fractional CFO has been around forever, but again, it's historically been more geographic based. So I show up at your office for a couple hours a week, those kind of things. So that's what I think about whenever I think about a fractional CFO. But I think the other term that kind of gets thrown in there is like a temporary or an interim CFO. Now those are, so there is kind of a big difference between those because the interim CFO is going to be more full-time or with an expiration date. So for a fractional CFO or a VCFO, whenever we talk about them, it's a pretty evergreen relationship. It doesn't mean that a client doesn't eventually grow out of that. We typically see that right around 50 million in revenue whenever they're like, hey, it's time to bring somebody in-house. They might feel differently, and it kind of depends on the type of business, somewhere between 25 and 50 million, but typically right around 50 million is whenever you start saying, okay, maybe you need more of a deal maker. And I know we'll dive a little bit more into that, but a true CFO in-house is really just dealing with contracts, going hunting down money, you know, those kind of things. They're not really dealing with the day-to-day finances. In the smaller companies, sub $50 million, we're really diving in and getting really heavily involved in finances, the operations of it, the planning, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of drifts whenever you get to 50 or $100 million entity. So those are kind of the differences. And like I said, temporary is going to be more of like, hey, somebody left, I need you to fill a gap for 6 months until I find somebody permanent. That's not, you know, really kind of our focus or what we'll really be talking about in those terms. I mean, I guess you could still kind of do those things, but for us, it's more about the annuity and the long-term relationship.
Yep. You can probably jump to the next slide.
All right, just okay.
Yeah, and so, and this is a good one here. So, you know, whenever you do get the slide deck and you want to look through any of this kind of stuff, this is a really cool slide. And there's a ton of buzzwords on here. So you see those things like trusted advisor and strategic foresight, all this other kind of stuff, proactive versus reactive. And it's just really a fancy way of just saying, I think I think it's more of like perspective setting. We're now in a seat where we're supposed to be asking the client questions instead of them asking us questions. So historically, the way the relationship was always driven was that we're the magic 8 ball. They come and shake us, they ask us an answer, we give them an insightful response, of course, completely qualified. Well, depends. Maybe you should do that, maybe you should do this, because I don't really have a real super intimate relationship with you, even if maybe I've been doing your taxes for a while. That kind of depends. But whenever you switch over to the virtual CFO model, the client expectation is that you're thinking on their behalf. The question, the thing that they will always say, Tom, I know we hear it all the time, is, I don't know what I don't know.
Yep.
And what's everybody else doing? And it's like, okay, so what they're really asking you is for you to proactively think on their behalf from a financial perspective. And whenever you see all those buzz terms on the one side versus the other side, that's really all we're talking about. Is there's a lot of power in being that guide for the client and asking them, hey, what about this and what about that? Because whenever you develop those relationships or you meet with clients, that's what you'll hear a lot of times. Oh, my current CPA never asked me those questions, or I know, because they know the answers. They'll think about those things if you pose the question. And so that's structuring the relationship that way. And the reason, frankly, that we have Christian on here is because he's built a really cool tool that is really the foundation and the backbone of what we do for the virtual CFO, forecasting, we'll talk a lot about that kind of stuff. But that's really showing the client what the future looks like is even more, so you ask the questions, they kind of give you the answers, and then being able to have a tool, a process to be able to deliver and show them what the future looks like is really kind of that powerful next step.
Yeah. And Adam talked about the sort of the buzzwords on the right side of the screen. And, obviously at PlanGuru, we attend a lot of education. We go to a lot of trade shows, and there's a lot of buzzwords around there, around the industry. And I guess sort of the point of this presentation is to get a little more practical and really drill down on what these exercises are, get rid of the buzzwords and replace them with practical exercises that are really time tested. And honestly, a lot of my perspective comes from my background. Before I joined PlanGuru, I was the worldwide plan analyst for IBM's Global Technology Services Group. Prior to that, I had a similar role for IBM North America across all of their brands, and sort of living in that finance team cadence, which was a never-ending routine of preparing for one meeting and then getting ready, and then as soon as you're done with that meeting, getting ready for the next one. That's really shaped a lot of the way I talk about these things and the way I see things. Obviously, since joining PlanGuru, I've worked with hundreds of businesses, nonprofits, and business advisors. Issued over 10,000 CPE credits between this and PlanGuru University and things like that. And, we've actually been around since 2000 at PlanGuru. The cloud product that we have now is the third time that we've soup to nuts rebuilt the product. And, part of the reason why we think we have something so good is because of the feedback that we've received over those 23 years from folks like Adam. And trust me, Adam gives us a lot of feedback, says
yes, I do.
We always summit a debt of gratitude for all they've done to help us shape this product. And actually, we've got some exciting announcements in the coming months here that Summit was a big part of shaping as well. So, and again, we work with everything from pre-revenue companies to all the way up to, our biggest customer had 187 cost centers at one point. I don't know that we're really cut out for that usually, but it worked for that one client. So, and yeah, we go beyond simply teaching software. We want to teach the process of better decision-making through these regular processes or this regular cadence, whatever term you prefer. Train accountants, bookkeepers, advisors on how to provide these services, and also connecting organizations. Obviously, Adam in Summit is the role model of, I mean, in my opinion, the role model for that full service firm that wants to do everything from your system setup through the virtual CFO. But there's a lot of folks out there that either fit more into the bookkeeping space or fit into the dedicated fractional CFO space. They don't necessarily have the capacity or bandwidth to provide everything. So, part of what we want to do here at PlanGuru is help connect organizations with complementary skills in pursuit of providing the fractional CFO stuff.
I would just, the only thing that I would add there is just whenever we're working with other accounting firms and everything, I would say also that there's just a fear around what do I talk about and how do I talk about it. So Christian, to your point, I think, again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, the foundation of our VCFO service is really financial forecasting. So,
right.
We'll dig into what exactly that means and how that works, but that's kind of the key here is just if you are saying, hey, I want to make that next move, I want to be in that proactive advisor role. It's really about creating a process and having the tools to support that. And for us, it is the forecast.
Cool. So when we go to Scaling New Heights or QuickBooks Connect or any of these trade shows, we say, hey, do you budget or forecast? And the typical response is, oh yeah, I helped my client build a budget for the bank. And that's kind of the first and most basic reason why business advisors and businesses do projections is they have to issue an external estimate. Obviously, those are important when needed, but that's not really what we're talking about today. Another reason somebody might build a budget or a forecast is they're about to make a big decision. And, it's this big monumental decision and they decide, hey, we've got to sit down and project this. And they sort of do it for the first time, but it's not a part of a regular routine. Strategic planning is another reason why we do projections, longer term, higher level. It's an opportunity to get the different stakeholders on the same page. I think that's maybe the most important function of a strategic planning exercise is to get all the owners and all the stakeholders in a room and set the vision for the future. But I think Adam will agree, it's sort of that the most important from our perspective is setting that budget, which is what you hope to achieve, coming back around each month, measuring not each month, every day for that matter. How are we doing against that budget? And then the process of reforecasting. Okay. So the next slide, I get into that a little bit more. So when we talk about a budget from our perspective is a set of goals of what the business hopes to achieve. You don't want it to be too pie in the sky. You want it to be achievable, but you also want it to be ambitious. So in the budget setting process, maybe you can go up and down the P&L, hopefully find some ways to immediately unlock improvement by asking those questions that Adam talked about as you drill down on each account. But more importantly, we're setting targets with incentives that are designed to improve sales or implement better cost controls. Obviously, once we set those targets, we need to measure performance, right? We need to assign responsibility and hold people accountable. And guess what? That changes behavior. When somebody knows that Adam is going to show up on the 10th of the month and come into a meeting and ask a bunch of difficult questions, it changes behavior. People, are worried about being embarrassed in that meeting, and they all month long are doing things differently because this accountability process is in place. So the CEO and the owner of the company and the virtual CFO, they meet with maybe a few different members of the team might be involved in the budgeting process. But then once we've gone through the budget review, once we've determined what's working, what's not working, then you break out the forecast and at least each month, we like to say, reassess where things are headed with all the information that you just acquired. In the previous session, you respin the forecast and try to figure out where you're headed.
Yeah, if I could just offer a little bit of just from our perspective, the budget, we always refer to it as the plan, right? You got to start with a plan. What's the idea? Draw me a picture. But it's a dynamic plan. It's built on some sort of logic. And this is really your opportunity to bring operations, sales, and finance all in one area. Because now whenever, instead of just saying, hey, here's what we did last year times 5% increase. Well, what are you doing to get a 5% increase? Was there a 5% sales increase? You know what I mean? What's the logic? How many of these things do we need to do? And then the operational people will say, well, I can't do that. And you're like, well, if you can't do that, readjust the plan. And then the salespeople might say, the operations people say, yeah, we can do 40 of those and 20 of those. And then the salesperson's like, yeah, but I never sell 40 of those and 20 of those. The ratio is usually 8-1. And it's like, so it's an opportunity again in this plan perspective. This first step is really just getting everybody on the same page with how we're building the plan, what it means to them in a non-financial matter, like what they have to do, and really breaking that stuff down. Because a lot of times whenever you're dealing with millions of dollars, it just kind of, everything gets a little blurry. And so if you make it really dynamic on the non-financial side, and I know we'll talk through some of this stuff, that's really where your opportunity is to kind of get everybody on the same page. And I think that it's even just more than accountability. On the flip side, sometimes clients they have this perception of what, and Tom, I know a few of your clients, so I know this is true. They will tell you for sure, this is how everything operationally works, and this is the result on the finance side. But then whenever you get to the end of the month, it's like, not so much,
not quite.
And it's always death by 1,000 cuts, right? There's this reason or that reason. But after you see a trend 3 or 4 months, it's like, hey, that's just not reality. And so whenever you're going through this rolling forecast, it gives you an opportunity to also just sandbox different ideas as well. So if you're saying, hey, like, here's new reality, what happens if we change this percentage, or we change this number of this things that we're going to do at this average price? What's going to be the impact? So whenever we're talking about rolling forecasts, a lot of times we're talking about adjusting things to the way they actually are performing, but it also gives you an opportunity whenever what Christian was showing on those other slides, where it showed like, big decisions, those kind of things. It also gives you a decision tree for, hey, what if this and what if that, so we do a lot of contingency planning with our clients. Tom, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
Oh, I agree with what you're saying completely. And that arrow back is what I would emphasize, that continuing forecast, to Christian's point about as an ongoing measure versus this is a one-time thing for the bank, or even the most brilliant forecast I'd come up with, if I just hand it to an owner and say, here, go do this, that doesn't really help. And that constant checking is really important.
I think by doing it each month and making sure you put in the time to refresh your forecast, by keeping it fresh, the incremental work each month is a lot less than if you revisit it once a quarter or once a year. So it actually, I don't know, it might even take less time because you're sort of more on top of it and making tweaks instead of entire sort of revisit of a discussion that you haven't had in a long time.
Yes.
But this, I tried to change this before the meeting, but I ended up screwing it up worse. But that does say strategic planning in purple up there. But, we just call this the repeating cycle of success. Again, if a company's a January fiscal year, sometime in the late summer, early fall is a good time to go through that strategic planning exercise. Then in the fall through the early stages of the next year, you can. Some companies, smaller companies, might wait till they close the books and finalize their budget in January. But the strategic plan, the first year of the strategic plan sets the tone for the budget. They don't have to perfectly tie to each other, but they should coordinate with each other. And then every month we have that ongoing performance review. How did we do versus the budget or the plan? And then finally we reforecast. So.
I think this is an important slide. Just to emphasize this is that I think that a lot of times we have a tendency in practice to get caught up in the day-to-day, and we will just roll the forecast forward without taking the opportunity to really help our clients step back like we would on a new engagement. So that purple time frame that you have there, Christian, I think that's the one that we always have to remind people the hardest of, is like, hey, make sure that you're doing that first. Otherwise, what happens in orange is just a rinse and repeat of what we already know. in the bigger conversation, the 2 to 3, 5 year conversation never really comes out. Because we're just like, oh, that's how we did, and so that's how we'll do now, and everything's just going to keep rolling forward, right? And it's like, yeah, probably, but should it be? And that's why that purple, that's the part as a virtual CFO that I think that we're constantly have to kind of remind the team, did you have these big picture kind of conversations?
I agree. The best example I can think of that, Adam, was with one client, and when they did their 3-year plan, they wanted to grow so much, they realized that they believe their niche that they're in is not big enough to help them do that. And that started a short term, like a 6-month goal of, okay, let's define the next one and launch that. And I could see if it was a rolling forecast, you may get to a point and probably just would have been frustrated that we've topped out in this one niche. And they saw that value of looking longer and saying, oh, there's something we have to do in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just to, again, drill down on some of these exercises a little bit more, a strategic planning exercise, you're setting the long-term vision for what you hope to achieve. Again, it should align with the operating budget, should align with the first year of the strategic plan. It serves as a framework for what if exercises. Now, if you're dealing with a company that is a smaller company, single QuickBooks class, few million in revenue, the strategic plan and the budget and the forecast might all be one, from a PlanGuru terminology perspective, a single scenario, right? It can all be done in a single analysis. As companies get bigger, though, oftentimes there's a divergence. They need that detailed location by location operating budget, but when they need to run some what if exercises, all of a sudden just, hey, let's see what happens if we increase revenue 5%. That's like steering a battleship where we need to pull 150 levers to get all 10 locations to roll up. So sometimes the strategic plan does need to be a fundamentally different exercise. It's a little bit more flexible, so that you can allow for that sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, ratios, break even. And also in some ways, it can serve as a personal financial review for the business owner. People who don't own a business, people who have a job where they get a 401k and they have their stocks and bonds, it's easy for them to get an understanding of what their financial life looks like. They print out a statement. But for a small business owner, it's not like that at all, right? They might have a huge portion of their net worth tied up in the business. And again, a strategic planning exercise gives you the ability to say, okay, how much cash is this business going to kick off over the next 10 years? How much of that should you be putting aside? In some situations, business valuations can be a little dangerous. You're getting into some, discount rates, cost of capital can get, tread lightly. Your business is worth $5 million, just because you run a quick, you want, again, tread lightly with the business valuation, but it is, again, a framework for at least, helping them get an understanding of where they stand in their long-term goals.
And Christian, you'll probably answer this later. We did get a question about, does PlanGuru have options for what if analysis? And I'm guessing as you talk a little more for PlanGuru, whenever you want to answer that, but that is a question that we have.
Absolutely. We can create as many different scenarios as you want. And yeah, so.
Okay, perfect.
So again, Adam calls them a plan. We just use the term budget. I think we use these terms interchangeably. But a budget is a comprehensive set of goals of what the business hopes to achieve. We got a question here, poll question.
Oh, that's okay. You can go ahead. We'll just let the poll question, as people answer, it'll disappear from our screen.
Okay, that's cool.
Sorry, that was distracting.
So I didn't know if I was supposed to stop or something.
Nope, nope, you're good.
A budget is so it should be aspirational yet achievable. Okay, worst way to start off the year is with an unachievable budget, where the team's like from day one, like, this is ridiculous. We can't. Like, it's not going to work.
Sure.
Adam already talked about how involving people in the target setting process, right? You don't want to let them set their own budget, because obviously, they might not set the goals high enough and they want to hit their quota. But on the flip side, you want to make them feel like they have some say in working on that budget. So the consistent budget versus actual comparisons is, again, what allows you to each month keep revisiting these things, keep questioning how things are going, how you're doing. Assigning responsibility while maintaining accountability. I personally find that there's a general, like when we work with a new business, sometimes there is a general reluctance to push the exercise down as low as it needs to go. I don't know if you guys observe that at all, but a lot of times it's just like, oh no, this is just for me and the controller. And then we sort of push on them. Well, don't you have a sales and marketing manager? Don't you know? So again, just as a rule of thumb, I think you got to be vigilant about making sure that we involve enough people so that we get the results we want.
Yeah, I think you're right. Your example in sales, I think, is perfect, right? If it's done at the top and someone says, I'm going to grow by 20% next year and doesn't include the sales team, you may have a sales team saying, I don't think I can do that, or I need some investment or something like that. So engaging in them in that. And even then saying, okay, so help me understand like how much comes from existing customers and new customers and how are you going to go get those can be a really valuable exercise for keeping them in there.
So we just talked about oh, Adam, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, it really kind of depends on the size of the company and their leadership team. So that's one of the first questions we ask whenever we jump on the team is, hey, we're helping to round out this small council, this leadership team by bringing in a financial person. So we ask who else sits at the table. So if it is just a single owner, then we ask, are there other people that we want to pull into it? And sometimes the answer is no, depending upon transparency, but oftentimes they do have 2 or 3 different people on the team that are kind of senior leadership. And so if they don't already have a leadership team meeting, that's one of the first things that we suggest is, hey, let's create a small council, if you will, leadership team meeting on a weekly basis. And we'll usually tag into that. And from a financial perspective, we'll lead a lot of those conversations.
Yeah. We talked about having a role in the target setting and the regular reviews are required, but also a good thing is that I call it the identification of red flags. It's that sort of, okay, if this happens again, stop the presses and let us know. It's like these, when you're doing this regularly, you identify these trigger points where, again, when this happens, when you're not going to hit your budget, you send an email to me, the owner, you send an email to Adam, our CFO. And the more you do this, the more times you come up with those trigger points. I used to sort of make this joke, and maybe I even made it the joke when we did a couple months ago when we did your podcast. Where we'd say, the CFO and the owner are in a room and they bring in the sales and marketing manager and you say, now go hit that budget. I don't care. You do what you got to do to hit that budget. And then they leave the room and you look at each other and go, there's no way we're hitting that budget. So I actually, because that's the way it worked at IBM. I can't even tell you. Sometimes we had like 3 forecasts. Like sometimes we were even afraid to tell our GM the truth, So I've been reading some literature from this organization called Beyond Budgeting out of the UK. I kind of backtrack, and I don't know that that's terribly productive. I think there needs to be more of a give and take. And the reason for that is you can incent poor behavior. The chart on the right-hand side is created by that Beyond Budgeting outfit to basically indicate that, once someone's blown through their budget and already hit their quota, they might start sandbagging sales and let them roll over to the next quarter. The converse and more likely is, oh no, I'm not going to hit my budget. I'm going to give out some ridiculous discount because I've got to get to my budget. That's kind of what this the trend on the chart on the left-hand side of this slide indicates, is that when they did a study in this one company of what their rebates and trends looked like before they implemented a quarterly targeting process and after, and they found these huge spikes and huge variations in when discounts and rebates not for any real business reason other than the sales quotas were coming due. And it does need to be, so again, instead of these hard, fast targets, you might want to consider more of a dynamic budgeting scorecard where you're considering other non-financial metrics, maybe a budget adjustment, like a formal process for adjusting the budget when certain realities become clear about how the budget isn't achievable. You might even want to layer in some subjective criteria like that, you know, just to give yourself a little leeway to, again, reward good performance when the budget wasn't hit, but therefore just not purely, you know, just because the budget was hit doesn't mean somebody did a great job either. And adjust for learning experiences. When something bad happens for the first time and it was unexpected and no one anticipated it, allow your budget to adjust for that. But never again, kind of thing. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know, Adam, maybe on this last bullet point, you can talk about this, but I think for most small businesses, a bottoms up budget is what's most appropriate. When I say bottoms up, I'm talking about starting with the independent business units, budgeting them, and then rolling up a consolidated view. When I used to work at IBM, we had a very much a tops down approach. We were handed from on high, this is what your brand is expected to do. And we would then figure out how this is what your, and then we would then figure out how we're going to do that by region and by product. A lot of nonprofits do need to do a tops down approach just because they're working with a finite amount of resources. But obviously there is a sort of a hybrid where you bottoms up for most accounts and then allocate out certain corporate expenses to the lower levels.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of times, bottoms up is probably the majority of them, but I would say this is really from a VCFO perspective where you can be a little bit of a pit bull and you can overstep your bounds. So again, like I was talking earlier, how are we going to get to 20% increase year over year? How are we going to do this? This is where I'll push on the salespeople or I'll push on operations a little bit. And the get out of jail free card that I use all the time, and I'm always just promoting to our internal team whenever you go to step into somebody else's stuff. What is it, Tom?
Financially speaking.
Yep. Financially speaking, this plan sucks. You know, so it's like, you know, so it's always asking like, so financially speaking, you're going to do 27 of those and 19 of those. Oh no, I can't do that. Again, you got to demystify some of these numbers whenever you're talking to operations or you're talking to sales teams. You really need to like understand, okay, what are you going to change about your day to day in order to operationalize this budget, this forecast? How are we going to do this? And so figuring out what those drivers are, to Christian's point earlier, and starting with that. So we'll walk it all the way through the revenue cycle and say, okay, so I want to start with who your customers are, why they buy from you. And I work all the way down to the very first process. So I intuitively understand that whole thing. And then and I already know what the answer is. I know how much they need to do in sales in order to hit their bottom line. I already know what their operating costs are. So I can kind of walk through all that and I say, okay, can we do this? Can we do that? And it's a back and forth, to your point, where they're involved and they're asking questions. But if you just said, hey, do $500,000, figure it out, or $5 million, figure it out, nobody really knows what the heck that means. But I can tell you that if you walk through that exercise of the non-financials and really push them on operationally what they need to change about how they're working, I can't explain it. It's like gravity. Like the client will just magically, they'll forget about everything you just did, by the way, but they will intuitively understand it and they'll come back and they'll just start hitting their numbers. Everything kind of moves in the right direction. You know, there's not this big aha moment. It's just all these little small things just paired with all that information that they have, and they will achieve those goals. They'll make better, smarter decisions in real time. They won't be doing this stuff because all this stuff that you're talking about right here with your discounts, I would have already covered that. I said, well, here's what you can't do. You can't fool me once, because now remember, if you do this, it's got to be at this average price and it's got to be at that. You get that? And they're like, yep. And so we never really have this like after the fact, you baited me into this number, so I had to do this in order to get there. If you have the conversation correctly, these things don't happen.
Yep. So, just practically speaking, when you're engaging your clients about this, as Adam already said, the forecast is the most tangible. And I've literally, I've experienced, I've had this sentiment expressed to me a couple of times. If you have a business, it's a smaller business, the owner's making every decision, and they say, well, let me get this straight. I'm going to hold myself accountable to me. Like, it's like, doesn't necessarily, again, even though we understand why setting targets and coming back and measuring performance is valuable, for some of those maybe more skeptical clients or some of those smaller clients, the forecast is where to start. In a dream world, we start with the strategic plan, it flows through the budget, and then you get into the repeating cycle of success. Adam might disagree with this, but again, I kind of look at it from if you're maybe dealing with some smaller clients than say Summit CPA does, you might find yourself in a situation where the forecast is more valuable than everything else, and you might want to start there. Getting buy-in, the client has to buy in, right? If they don't put in the effort, if they're just sort of going through the motions, then it's not going to work. You're not going to get better decisions. So again, client attitude is important, and if their client attitude's wrong, you need to sort of address that up front and take it from there. I say carrot and the stick for the team. Like, I don't know if anyone's took economics 101 or whatever that term is from, but yes, you do want to reward people if they hit their targets and the company's successful. And the stick takes the form of the embarrassment that someone goes through when they totally miss their budgeted numbers and they don't have any explanation or reason for that. And then finally, I say the adult in the room. You've got a lot of businesses where there's a lot of deep relationships and the husband-wife teams. I've actually in the second class of PlanGuru University, Bruce Bennis, one of our long-term fractional CFOs, was talking about a husband-wife team, that really has some very different opinions about where the business should go. And Bruce really needed to be there to kind of, get them on track and make sure that the discussion didn't degrade into something non-productive. So,
yeah, you're definitely a guide. You're not telling them, you're giving your opinion, which is super important. This is what I would do, but you're not mandating it, and you're asking questions so the client can kind of guide their way on their own. That's how we typically get pretty easy buy-in.
The other thing I like to say is for folks who are newer at this, that haven't necessarily done this a ton in the past, and aren't exactly sure how to sell. I mean, I always just talk about painting the picture. Obviously, it's probably not going to be this stress-free as the picture on the right-hand side of this. But many business owners struggle with delegation and accountability. They weren't management gurus, right? They had a good idea and they grew, and all of a sudden they've hired people and they've delegated responsibilities to them. And they struggle with holding people accountable. It might be family, friends in a lot of small businesses, and they struggle with the interpersonal relationships. You can come in, be the adult in the room, help them step outside of their comfort zone in addressing some of the problems that may exist within their organization. So I don't we got 8 minutes to get through like 10 more slides.
Sure.
Yeah, no, go ahead, man.
Things back. It's been really good.
Yeah.
So with forecasting, for budgeting and forecasting, part of it I like to say is it's about showing up. Showing up to that meeting, forcing the discussion. And for some really small businesses, This can be under an hour a month, half an hour to review the budget, half an hour to respin the forecast. Again, very small businesses, very easy situations, but I know a number of customers like that. And again, I'm just talking about that last little piece. You've closed the books, you suck the numbers into PlanGuru, we automatically run the budget versus actual reports, and then you spend most of the time respinning the forecast. But it stirs up conversations that wouldn't have otherwise happened. And you are a business advisor that works with dozens or maybe more clients. You see things that your owner doesn't see. So by having these conversations, you stir up concepts and ideas that wouldn't happen otherwise, and then it naturally extracts recommendations. Again, in the industry, so much buzz about trusted business advisor, all this, all this jargon and terminology, but what does that mean? Well, it's about giving your client good ideas, and simply reviewing historical information does not extract the recommendations from you the same way that the discussion of what's going to happen does. When you're talking about how are we going to do this, all of a sudden a little light bulb goes off in your head, and you think about a different client that you had that had a similar problem, and you give them ways to remedy that. Also, ready for the unexpected. It could be bad. It could be a bad unexpected, or it could be a good unexpected. But when you sit there every month and refine your forecast, if something unexpected happens, opportunity, risk, you're not scrambling to build a financial model. You've got your financial model, you bust it out, and you're ready to tackle the problem. You're ready to go into the bank a week later. And when you go into the bank, you say to the bank, hey, this isn't some hoop I jumped through for you. This isn't some half-baked thing I threw together to satisfy your underwriting department's requirements. Meet Adam. He's my virtual CFO. We do this every month. And because we do this every month, there's a much higher probability that your loan is going to get repaid, because we know that that's all they really care about. So anything on that, Adam, or?
No, I agree. I mean, it's a great tool for all that scenario planning. And I know you have like current rolling 12 months, 24 months. It's just one of those things that if you keep maintenance, banks love, clients love, it's just good all the way around to have always kind of going for the multitude of reasons you've already, kind of laid out. So.
Yeah. And Christian, to your point, you had mentioned, once a month is part of our service offering, and it does take about an hour. And so we're going in and saying, hey, from what we had seen, this is what we have. And maybe in scenarios, you had planned on adding a producer in 3 months. Let's look at how sales are going. If they're going so much better than that, should we pull that forward? And if we do, here's what that looks like. You can play out those kind of scenarios, but it's us prepping and then having that conversation.
And sometimes we'll do that as a separate meeting, and sometimes we'll blend it with the financial performance, to your point. So it depends on the size and complexity of the client, how much things are moving. If things aren't moving very often, we build it in with the performance review meeting. And you're right, it's about a 30-minute split. But for some clients, it's a more, there's a lot more moving pieces. And so we'll break it out and make it its own meeting. So we'll have 2 separate meetings.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna blow through these next 2 slides quick. And the point is, there's different size engagements for different types of customers, and obviously they pay very differently. We work with a lot of fractional CFOs who work with some very big companies, and again, they might be spending 2 days a week in order to perform that CFO function, because there's so many different stakeholders. So all the way down to that light review that we just talked about. Also teaching, training, and support. So some of your clients might have a pretty competent in-house person, and in that case, it maybe evolves to more of a teaching and training and support role. But I always encourage folks to be flexible. Don't have a single model. I also, again, we've already kind of discussed this a little bit. Sorry, my bar graph's off a little bit here, but I always find that we get a new business advisor. They come to us, they want help. They think about their clients, and they start with their biggest, most complicated client. And I equate that to strapping on your rental skis and pushing off down a double diamond on your first ski run ever. Like start with a smaller client, more manageable, get your feet wet. But also smaller means easier. And again, focusing on developing a large stable of clients that are on that 1 hour routine, as opposed to tackling your biggest, most dysfunctional client first, I think is a more a route that's more likely to result in success. So obviously, by doing this stuff, you can get a huge leg up in the client acquisition process. When you are getting a new potential customer, and you put this as a centerpiece of your offering, even if they may not need it up front. I mean, I know that Summit doesn't, if they don't need the CFO, that Summit's not going to take you on as a client. A lot of other firms can't go quite that far. So even if you're pitching a client on more traditional accounting services, letting them know that you have this CFO function in-house is going to increase the likelihood that they'll go with you over the competition. Again, good cop, bad cop is something we've already talked about before. You can be the bad cop to that owner who's not as comfortable holding people accountable. Turn on a dime. Again, we've already discussed this a little bit. When a new risk or opportunity emerges, you're ready to react. You're not scrambling to build projections for the bank. You break out the forecast, make some adjustments. Additionally, it creates a common language. When you get organized, when you build a budget, when you set forecasted targets, you start developing a shorthand that becomes useful in their day-to-day interactions. It's not about. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Christian, even if you don't want to be the bad cop, if you're that person, don't worry about it. The forecast is the bad cop. Like, that's the beauty of it. I don't have to say a word. I just show you the screen, and then the people are like, huh? And I'm like, yeah. And so the beauty is you don't have to be the bad cop. The forecast can kind of speak for itself. So.
Well, I meant it from the perspective. I mean, that's a good point.
No, I understand. I was just saying, like, the team always sometimes is like,
you've got an employee who's not doing a good job, and you can give the forecast can be the backbone that the client needs to be the bad cop and address an issue with it.
Understood. Yeah. Just sometimes the team is like hesitant about, like, and that's a big learning curve for VCFOs is, you can't just be all warm and fuzzy. You have to kind of call things out. But the cool thing is the forecast itself will call most of that stuff out. You just have to, when the client glosses over it, bring them back. So
I know we're right up at the line here. So we've had so much good discussion. Sure. I didn't get quite as far as I usually do when I'm just talking to myself, but it's about, it's not about getting it right. It's about setting a direction for the future, managing to a targeted profit. And there is no magic report. And I will end on this. Like, there is no magic report that's just going to analyze your historical data and magically come up with the answers about what to do. This is a process. It's about showing up each month. It's about going through the routine. And again, it's cultivating a better decision-making process. They shouldn't expect immediate 10% increase in profit in the next quarter or something like that. There's no magic bullet here. Yeah.
That's an excellent point.
And I just answered a question online. They were asking if there was like instead of just a chart for cash flow, I said cash flow is a standard report along with the income statement and the balance sheet inside of PlanGuru.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian. If we want to go to a couple out slides, thank you very much. That was really helpful. So I would encourage people, if they want to continue learning, you can go on a couple more slides. Here's Christian's contact information. So as people go through, if they read stuff in the slides they didn't hear or want to follow up on PlanGuru, here's your great contact to do that. If you want to jump ahead, I think it's 2 more slides. Christian, you mentioned the podcast. We had the Modern CPA Success Show podcast. We really would encourage people to listen to this. For forward-thinking CFOs, this is a great place where you can hear from clients, vendors, experts, sometimes employees about really good topics. If you want to be more interactive on the next slide, we'd encourage people to join the CFO community. So people are really thinking about virtual CFO. you can get connected to this Slack community, multiple channels. You can get a free month access to see what is there, but you've got accountants, people thinking about CFO kind of services, asking each other questions and sharing information. If you really want to dig deep into the virtual CFO, we offer a course called the Virtual CFO Playbook. So a 15 module, fairly intensive course, but it'll go through everything that we do for providing our services, including a free coaching session with Adam and I as people complete the course. Book subscriptions, we'll share how we do our pricing and actually share the tool that we use for doing pricing and everything. So if you want to kind of soup to nuts how everything is that we are doing it, please do that. And finally, if what you hear about us just sounds great and you say, I'd rather not do it on my own, I want to join you guys, we're always hiring people and would love to talk to people. So Adam, Christian, thank you guys very much. I think it was a really informative session that we had today. You're going to share your website. Yeah.
If I could throw up a plug here. You know, if you're interested in PlanGuru and how our solutions make this stuff much easier and while delivering a better service to your clients, you know, visit our website. We have the try it for free. Get matched up with one of our budgeting analysts. PlanGuru, it's only $99 a month for your first 3 clients, and then $29 a month per client after that, with some exceptions. And we really, generally speaking, we provide unlimited budgeting analyst assistance to fractional CFOs and accounting firms. And that doesn't mean we're going to build all your models for you, but we will definitely help in any kind of design questions, any of those more existential questions that you encounter as you're working with a new client. So
sounds
thanks.
great. Great.
And then Paul was asking about you know, the report that's similar to like cash flow tool. And so two different concepts for us. We use cash flow tool that integrates in with QuickBooks and all that kind of stuff. We use that for short-term cash flow planning. And so that's more of like a 13-week cash burn for us. And that's more at the account, or that's more at the detail level. So it's the actual like customer names, vendor names, very detailed, a lot of blocking and tackling. And then we use the cash flow forecasting inside of the forecasting tools to be able to be more at an account level. So what PlanGuru is going to give you is not like customer A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's going to give you this revenue type and all the expense accounts. And then you flip over to kind of see what the month by month view of cash flow looks like. We use cash flow tool to do cash flow planning on a weekly basis at a customer and vendor level. So a little bit different concept for us. I know some people look at cash flow on a monthly basis. If you're doing it on a monthly basis and you're wanting to look at it more on an account level, that's where something like you could just use PlanGuru, you know, as opposed to cash flow tool. That's kind of how I separate those two.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if somebody has a handful of very large clients, you know, you can budget customer by customer and receivables customer by customer in PlanGuru, but most businesses don't need to do that. You know, like a construction manager who's working on 6 big projects, you know, that's an example where you might get down to that customer level. Yeah, great point, Adam.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you guys again. Hope everyone has a really good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.